Greetings, this is Chris here from Woodman's Spirit Channel. I'm just having a coffee and I just thought I'd do a very brief video about some of the finer details in securing a new haft into an axe head. Yes, there are lots of good videos on YouTube about re-hafting and hafting axes, but I found over time, having done many axe heads, that there are a few key fine details that make the difference between having an axe head come loose over time through hard use, and these little tips and hints might just prevent you from having that kind of frustration. Okay, so what I'm working on here today while I have a coffee is a 2.5 pound Banko Swedish axe. This is a Scandinavian felling axe, medium weight I would call it, medium to lightweight felling axe. Kind of flat ground, there's no bevel on it, but I picked this head up for about I think it was either $3 or $5 Canadian. Already had a spare haft, which is a 30-inch hickory haft, a good quality one. Maybe not quite the size for me, but by the time I've trimmed a bit off the deer foot at the bottom of the haft and a little bit off the top of the haft, I'll probably get it down to about 28, which is almost what I'm looking for, really. Yeah, so this is about finessing. So here we have, I've already filed down and taken a lot of time to sand and file down and use a spoke shave to shape the end of the haft so it's a very close fit into the head. One of the first things that I do is I make sure that the cut in the axe haft is of sufficient length, usually about 2/3 of the depth of the pole, and this is quite a deep pole, probably nigh on 3 inches I would think, so I've got probably a good 2.5 inches of slot cut in ready to receive the wedge. The other thing, I don't know if you can quite see it here, but once you drive in the haft into the head, it tends to pinch. If you're fitting it well, it tends to pinch the cut to a point sometimes where there's no cut at all. So what I do is I tend to run a fine saw down the first 1/2 inch or so of the haft, and then get a triangular file and just file out the, as you can see there, just file out the edge of the slot in the haft, so that when you start to drive the wedge in, you're not going to shatter the wedge or break the fine edge off the wedge. It allows it to begin to start penetrating into the haft. I mean, there is a slight gap around the edge of the haft where it goes into the head here, but that's fine. What I do in that situation is I manufacture my own wedges. This is a piece of scrap hickory. Probably this is a good 2 inches long, I would think, and this is the way it goes in. It's not that way. You can see the grain runs longitudinally, so you don't want grain going across if you make a wedge. Another key thing I've found about making wedges is don't make the angle too steep. So what you've got to do is make almost like an edge that goes to 0 by using a file or a sandpaper on a block, or a belt sander if you're lucky enough to have one. And if you look at the profile of this, It's quite a slim wedge. It's not a steep angle wedge such as I've seen in quite a few shop bought ones. Now the reason you need to make them like this is that if you put them in too steep, once you start to drive them in, eventually the haft split flares towards the top of the head, and they do tend to pop out, or in some cases you can't even drive them in. So make it nice and slim. And I've sanded this one to a point where the thick end here is probably just over 1/8 of an inch, and that is pretty much what kind of width of slot I have here at the top. I've also left the top of the haft protruding just over 1/4 of an inch. I do always do this with re-hafting, because when I drive the wedge into the haft and it spreads, I can use the axe for a while, and if it comes loose I can drive it in further using a steel drift, so it goes in below the top of the haft here, and then usually after maybe a month of use of an axe I take it right back, maybe take about half that material off, so I've got just over 1/8 of an inch proud. But I never take them flush to the pole, because the problem with that is, you know, as wood is a different material obviously to axe steel, and wood gets crushed over time through the forces exerted by the axe and the leverage, and they do tend, you know, the fibres tend to get crushed. Now if you have the end of the haft gradually compressed, then you're going to have to re-wedge it, and getting an old wedge out of a axe haft that is cut off flush and has been used a while often means you're going to wreck the handle and have to either buy or make a new one. So once I've sanded down the wedge, I use a very coarse abrasive like this. This is, I don't know, no, it doesn't say on here. It's about a 60 grit belt, like belt sander grit. But I sand the wedge down longitudinally, and the reason for this is it provides a mechanical key between the inside of the slot in the axe haft and the wedge itself. Some people have asked me about when is the right time to soak the end of the haft in linseed oil, or other kinds of oil if you prefer, like pine tar mix. Personally, I think the best route, and it certainly works for me, is before I drive this wedge into the head, and I have to mark it and cut it to an exact width, the exact width of the eye. So if the haft is slightly narrower than the eye, it's got to be that little bit wider. But before I drive the wedge in, I'll put the axe vertically in a bench vise, and I'll pour a very thin solution of linseed oil and turpentine into the eye of the axe and into the slot that is cut. That allows for it to penetrate before I tighten the whole axe head up by driving the wedge in a long way. Once it starts to soak in, I'll just keep adding a little bit from the top, and also when I've been using it, sometimes I let a little bit run down the haft, or when I eventually get around to oiling the haft, I'll let it run and it'll soak in to the tiny gap around the edge of the where the haft goes into the head. You have a very tiny gap there in the front. I'll probably pound this a little bit further with a mallet just to make sure it's secure. So yeah, you know, just soak the haft before you drive the wedge in for a final time, and dip the wedge in the same solution or pine tar or something, drive it in not quite flush to the slot in the haft. Maybe leave it sticking out maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and then usually what I do is go and hack the hell out of a really hard piece of wood, knotty wood, just to see if there's any creepage on the axe head. If there is, then I can always drive the wedge down a little further. But if I cut it off flush, then I've lost the opportunity. So as I was saying, this is a Seta Banko. It's a little bit rusty, but it's in good shape. And you can probably just make out the S and the A there, TER, and the B of the word Banko, and a number 3. I'm not sure what number 3 means, just there. Yes, so I just thought I'd make this while I was having a traditional Sami cup of coffee. I have my own peculiar way of making coffee, and I might include that in one of my outdoor videos in future. Well, thanks for watching, and thanks for your subscriptions, and look out for more videos soon.